Late one night, when everyone else was fast asleep, Lucas quietly approached me and leaned in close to my ear, whispering softly. He introduced himself. He wanted to know how far his tale had traveled and asked me where I was listening from. Together with my husband, Roberto, who is 40 years old, we run a small hot dog stand in a quaint countryside town. We've been in this business for what feels like forever, and the locals often say our hot dogs are the best in town. We work the night shift, serving the late night crowd, and take Mondays off to rest. Roberto and I have been married for 13 years, and our 8-year-old daughter, Maria, is the light of our lives. She brings us so much joy, and we cherish every moment with her. Roberto and I are not just husband and wife. We are also the best of companions. Before Maria was born, we were known for being party enthusiasts, always out and about, not caring what others thought of us. We lived life to the fullest, attending parties, going to shows, and indulging in all sorts of wild and crazy adventures. But as the years passed, our priorities naturally shifted. The things we once loved to do no longer held the same appeal. We stopped going out as much, putting aside the wild activities we used to enjoy so much. Instead, we turned our focus to our work and our family, making them the center of our lives. Roberto discovered new hobbies, and I did too. As he grew older, he developed a keen interest in fishing, something that quickly became his new passion. Before that, he was all about cycling, but almost overnight, fishing took over his life. At first, I thought this new hobby would be just another passing phase, like so many others before it, but I soon realized that his love for fishing was here to stay. To give you an idea of how serious he is, Roberto started collecting fishing rods and even bought himself a series of exclusive fishing outfits. Meanwhile, my hobby has been going to the gym, although I don't get as much free time as Roberto does. I'm the one who takes care of Maria most of the time, handling the day-to-day responsibilities of raising our daughter. Exactly 2 months ago, Maria started to miss her paternal grandparents terribly. She talked about them constantly and longed to visit them. So we decided to take advantage of her school vacation and let her spend some time with them. This would also give Roberto and me some much-needed time alone, just the two of us. I was thrilled at the thought of finally having some quality time together. But then, out of nowhere, our plans took an unexpected turn. Roberto's fishing group invited him to go on a fishing trip. Among the group was a friend of Roberto's, a man who had always caught my eye. He was strikingly handsome, and though I had always kept my thoughts to myself, the attraction was undeniable. Recently, at a dinner with friends, I noticed this man, Lucas, looking at me in a way that made it clear he had intentions toward me. For the first time, I became aware that he saw me differently, and it made me uneasy. The fishing trip wasn't just a simple outing. It was a 3-day adventure on a large boat, complete with sleeping quarters, out in the middle of a secluded lake. When Roberto told me about the trip, I couldn't help but feel conflicted. On one hand, I desperately wanted to spend time with my husband, especially since we had been planning for this moment for so long. But on the other hand, the idea of Lucas being there stirred something inside me. Despite my excitement, I was saddened that Roberto was willing to trade our precious time together for a fishing trip with his friends. My mind became clouded with frustration and disappointment. I confronted Roberto, telling him that there was no way he could go on this trip. I had planned our alone time for so long, and now he wanted to throw it all away to be with his friends. As I spoke, I started to realize that the chemistry between us wasn't what it used to be. With Maria away, I didn't want to be left alone, feeling abandoned. I made a scene, explaining to Roberto that this was supposed to be our time together, and if he went, I would feel completely deserted. Roberto, seeing how upset I was, looked torn and unsure of what to do. After a moment of hesitation, he agreed not to go, but the atmosphere between us became tense and heavy. I had prepared a wonderful meal for us, but Roberto didn't even touch it. The food just sat there, growing cold as we sat in silence. The awkwardness lingered through dinner, and when we finally finished, we went to our bedroom without exchanging another word. He was clearly upset with me, and his silence continued until we went to bed. Each moment that he didn't speak only made me more upset. Despite the ups and downs in our relationship, I still wanted to rekindle the spark between us, but it seemed like he didn't share that desire. I didn't want to spend the next few days in such a tense atmosphere, nor did I want to be seen as the annoying wife who wouldn't let her husband go fishing with his friends. So I took a deep breath, called out to him in the calmest voice I could manage, and told him that he could go fishing with his friends. I knew how much he loved it, and I didn't want to stand in the way of something that brought him so much joy. He turned to me, surprised, and asked if I was serious, if I wasn't going to be mad at him. I shook my head and assured him that everything was fine. His expression changed instantly, and he smiled, hugging me tightly, returning to the lively Roberto I knew so well. He quickly grabbed his phone and began sending excited messages to his friends, telling them that he was in and that he'd be joining them on the trip. I watched him, feeling a mix of emotions. Part of me was happy to see him so excited, but another part of me was disappointed that our time together had been sacrificed. When he returned to bed, he lay next to me and gave me a tight hug, smiling that familiar smile he had when he was genuinely happy. Then, out of nowhere, he asked if I wanted to come with him. He said his friends would enjoy having me along, and maybe some of them would even invite their girlfriends. He reminded me that I had never been fishing and that it would be nice to have me there. I paused for a moment, thinking about the idea. Fishing wasn't something I had ever been interested in, and the last thing I wanted was to intrude on his time with his friends. But I asked him if he was sure I wouldn't be in the way, and if his friends wouldn't think it was strange for me to join them. Roberto hugged me even tighter, reassuring me that they'd love having me there, and that he'd be much happier if I went along. I smiled at him, feeling a bit more at ease. But the thought of spending 3 days on a boat with Roberto and Lucas left me feeling conflicted. However, I thought it might be a chance to spend some quality time with Roberto and clear my mind. So, I decided to give it a shot and told him I'd go. Half jokingly, I added that I'd always been curious about what fishing was like. Roberto was thrilled, and he immediately began explaining everything to me. The different types of fishing rods, the various baits, and the techniques. It was like a quick fishing lesson, and I could see the excitement in his eyes as he spoke. His enthusiasm was contagious, and I found myself getting more excited about the trip, even though a dark thought lingered in the back of my mind. Before we went to sleep, Roberto told me that we'd be heading out for the fishing trip the next day, right after lunch. But before that, he wanted to stop by a friend's store to buy me a fishing rod and outfit. I thought it was a good idea, and the next morning I was woken up with a wonderful breakfast. Roberto was so excited that for a moment I felt like we were back in the early years of our marriage. While I was sipping my coffee, he couldn't stop smiling, clearly happy with my decision to join him on the fishing trip. After breakfast, things between us heated up even more, and we shared a moment of intense passion. But even during that intimate moment, I couldn't stop thinking about Lucas. It was one of those times that make the world around you disappear, but we got so caught up in each other that we almost lost track of time. Afterward, we took a quick shower and started packing our bags, only bringing the essentials, including bikinis to enjoy the sun. We loaded everything into the car and headed to the fishing store to pick up the last few items we needed. When we arrived, I was surprised to see Lucas standing in front of the store chatting with a friend. The front of the store was eye-catching, with a huge canoe displayed at the entrance, looking like something out of a movie. It was impressive, and the parking lot was filled with smaller boats and canoes, giving the place a rustic charm. As we entered the store, we were greeted by the sound of laughter. Roberto's 3 friends were already inside, waiting for us, relaxed and drinking beer, excited about the upcoming fishing trip. At that moment, I felt a shiver of anticipation. Lucas came in and greeted everyone, shaking hands, but when he got to me, he kissed me on the cheek and smiled. The atmosphere was lively, and I couldn't help but feel a mix of anxiety and excitement, eager to get to the lake. I've never been one to be easily intimidated, but knowing that I'd be spending 3 days on a lake with my husband and a man I was undeniably attracted to left me feeling a bit dizzy. Even so, the good mood of the group was infectious. As soon as I got inside, they offered me a cold beer, and while the men laughed and joked, I couldn't help but let my eyes drift toward Lucas. He had a way of making me feel things I didn't even fully understand, and it was hard to control my emotions. As I looked around the store, I realized that it wasn't just a place to buy fishing gear. It was a meeting place, a social hub for the group. Since I had already decided to commit to this new hobby, I asked Roberto to help me choose a fishing rod. Lucas quickly stepped in, telling Roberto to relax and have fun while he showed me around the store. In that moment, I felt something that had been missing in my relationship. A sense of initiative and assertiveness that Lucas exuded. As he showed me the different fishing rods, he kept complimenting me, even mentioning that Roberto often talked about our relationship, so he knew what we were going through. It became clear to me that Lucas was aware that our relationship was no longer in its best phase, and he seemed to take advantage of that by intensifying his compliments. Although I outwardly showed discomfort, only I knew the turmoil I was feeling inside. Despite my initial discomfort, I began to accept his compliments, and I even told him he could compliment me, but to be careful that no one else heard. The slight smile on his face told me that he understood exactly what I wanted, and he was quick to respond. After choosing my fishing rod, we went to the cashier, paid for our items, and rejoined Roberto. I told him I was eager to get to the lake, so without much delay, we all headed out, each in our own car. Everyone was already a bit tipsy, and we ended up getting stuck in traffic on the way. By the time we arrived at the lake, it was already nightfall. We all pitched in to set up a bonfire, creating a cozy atmosphere by the water's edge. As the fire crackled and the night grew darker, we settled in around the fire, sipping on drinks and enjoying the peacefulness of the lake. Lucas pretended to drink while I savored a good wine, listening to the conversations and stories being shared. Gradually, one by one, people began to head to their rooms, until it was just Lucas and me left by the fire. The atmosphere was so warm and inviting that I didn't want the night to end. As we sat by the fire, Lucas began talking about random things, mentioning that he also enjoyed going to the gym and that he had a passion for cooking. I found it interesting how similar our hobbies were, and I became more engaged in the conversation. Throughout our talk, Lucas kept finding ways to compliment me, and once again, I asked him to keep his voice down. He leaned in closer, whispering in my ear that if I wanted, he could talk even closer so no one would hear. That moment was surreal. A shiver ran down my spine, and when I turned to look at him, I saw the desire in his eyes. Unable to resist, I leaned in and kissed him. I know it was wrong, but the combination of the wine, the intimate atmosphere, and the late hour led me to act on impulses I normally kept in check. After that first kiss, we couldn't keep our hands off each other, our bodies moving together as one, with no boundaries or rules. It all happened right there by the campfire, surrounded by the sounds of nature, as Lucas and I finally gave in to the desires we had both been suppressing. The next morning, without the wine clouding my mind and the intensity of the previous night, I woke up feeling different. Everyone else was already up, excited to go fishing, but I felt a strange mix of anxiety and guilt that I couldn't shake. Lucas had an unexpected situation arise and had to return to the city that day, leaving us with 2 more days at the lake. We had fun, but the guilt I felt inside was overwhelming. When we returned home, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of thoughts, unsure of what to do. I decided that this would be my biggest secret. Lucas didn't contact me after that, and I realized that he might have just been satisfying some ego-driven desire. Or perhaps he too felt the weight of guilt. That's how my story unfolded. What do you think I should do? How can I ease my guilt? How should I have handled this situation? It's been 2 months, and Roberto doesn't suspect anything, but the guilt is consuming me. Please share your thoughts in the comments below